Olivia, the name left Alexander Rowan before he could stop it. At 2 in the morning, with snow pressing hard against the diner windows and nearly 100 miles between him and Rowan territory, the King Alpha had expected nothing more complicated than black coffee and a place for his convoy to wait out the storm. Instead, a white ceramic plate slipped from behind the counter and struck the rubber mat with a sharp crack. The woman who had dropped it did not move. Neither did he. Olivia Harper stood beneath the yellow diner lights wearing a faded blue apron over a plain gray sweater, one hand gripping the edge of the counter. Her blonde hair was tied back loosely, her face paler and thinner than he remembered. But that was not what stole the air from his lungs. The apron curved over a heavily pregnant stomach that no amount of loose fabric could hide. 8 months. Alexander knew before he allowed himself to count. 8 months since Olivia had disappeared from the palace. 8 months since he had been told she no longer wanted the life that came with being the mate of a King Alpha. 8 months since every message he sent had gone unanswered. Around them, the diner continued breathing as though the world had not just split open. Coffee hissed behind the counter. A neon sign buzzed near the window. An older truck driver stirred sugar into his cup without looking up. Olivia bent slowly, picked up the plate, and placed it beside the sink. When she finally met Alexander's eyes, her expression was controlled enough to hurt more than anger would have. "Your coffee will be ready in a minute, Your Majesty." Alexander stared at her. "Do not call me that. That is what everyone calls you." "You did not." Something flickered across her face, then disappeared. She turned toward the coffee machine. Alexander looked at the way she moved carefully, one hand occasionally supporting the small of her back. His own hands remained at his sides because he did not know what right he had to reach for her anymore. "How long have you been here?" he asked. Olivia poured the coffee. "Long enough." "Why are you working?" She set the mug in front of him. "People usually work because they need money." "You know what I mean." "I know exactly what you mean." Her voice stayed quiet. That made every word sharper. Alexander glanced toward the narrow staircase near the kitchen, the old coat hanging from a hook, the worn shoes visible beneath her apron. Nothing about this looked like the life of a woman who had left a palace because she wanted something better. Olivia placed a small container of cream beside his cup. "The highway should reopen by morning." "Olivia." She looked at him again. His eyes dropped despite himself to her stomach, then rose immediately back to her face. He saw the moment she understood the question forming before he spoke it. The silence between them became heavier than the snow outside. Alexander calculated the months again, even though the answer had not changed. His voice was lower when he finally asked, "How far along are you?" Olivia's hand tightened around the counter. 8 months. The diner seemed to go completely silent, although nothing had changed. 8 months. The exact amount of time since she had vanished. Alexander felt every unanswered question of the past year turned toward one terrifying possibility. Olivia looked away first. "Your coffee is getting cold." Alexander did not touch it. He watched her walk toward the far end of the counter, moving with the careful exhaustion of someone who had been carrying too much alone. Beneath the collar of her sweater, a thin chain shifted in the light. For 1 second, Alexander saw the edge of a familiar silver ring resting against her chest. The Rowan ring he had given her years ago. She still had it. She just no longer wore it on her hand. Outside, the storm buried the road beneath fresh snow. Inside, the King Alpha sat frozen over untouched coffee, staring at the woman he had believed chose to leave him and realizing that the truth might be far more complicated than either of them had survived admitting. Alexander remained in the diner until Olivia's shift ended. The storm kept most travelers off the highway, leaving only the low hum of the refrigerator cases and the occasional scrape of a chair across the floor. His security team waited outside in black vehicles half covered with snow, but Alexander did not call them in. Olivia moved behind the counter as though he were any other customer, wiping tables, refilling sugar containers, and avoiding his eyes whenever she passed. At 4:30, Maggie Collins, the older woman who owned the diner, came from the kitchen wearing a red cardigan and carrying a set of keys. She looked at Alexander once, then at Olivia. "You are done for the night, honey." Olivia removed her apron. "I can finish the counter." "The counter will survive." Maggie's eyes dropped briefly toward Olivia's stomach. "Go upstairs and rest." Alexander looked toward the narrow staircase near the kitchen. Olivia noticed. Do not what?" Start solving things. She folded the apron carefully and placed it beneath the register. You have been here for 2 hours, and I can already see you planning how to rearrange my life. Alexander stood. You are 8 months pregnant and working until 4 in the morning. I noticed. There is a hotel 15 miles east. My people can arrange a suite until the road's clear. Olivia reached for her coat. I live here. Alexander looked toward the stairs again. Above the diner? Yes. Olivia. It has heat. Running water. A door that locks. I am fine. The word fine sounded exhausted. Alexander stepped closer but stopped on the other side of the counter. Let me help you. Olivia gave a quiet laugh, without humor. With what? Anything. He reached into his coat, removed his wallet, and placed several folded bills on the counter. Olivia stared at the money as though he had placed something offensive between them. Then she pushed it back. No, this is not charity. Then what is it? Alexander had no answer ready. Olivia pulled on her coat slowly. I am not one of your responsibilities anymore. Something in his expression changed. Is that what you think happened? Olivia went still. What else would I think? You left without speaking to me. Her eyes sharpened. I tried to speak to you. Alexander frowned. No, you did not. The silence that followed was different from the silence before. Olivia studied him carefully, as though waiting for a cruel joke that never arrived. I requested an audience with you 3 times. I never received a request. I sent letters. I never received letters. Olivia looked away first. The diner suddenly felt too small for everything neither of them understood. You made yourself very clear, she said. Alexander lowered his voice. Apparently, so did you. She turned back to him. What does that mean? I was told you left because you could not accept the duties of being my mate. Olivia's face lost what little color remained. Who told you that? Alexander hesitated. The palace council. Her hand moved instinctively toward the chain beneath her sweater, where the old Rowan ring rested hidden against her chest. Of course they did. Alexander heard the bitterness. What were you told? Olivia looked at him for a long moment. Snow tapped softly against the diner windows. Finally, she said, that you did not want to see me, that you had already decided what mattered more. Alexander felt the first cold edge of doubt move through everything he had believed for 8 months. Olivia, I never said that. Her eyes filled with something too controlled to become tears. Maybe not to my face. She picked up her keys. That does not mean I did not hear it clearly. Then she turned toward the stairs, leaving Alexander alone beside an untouched stack of money and the growing realization that whatever had separated them, neither of them seemed to remember choosing it. Alexander did not sleep. By sunrise, the storm had weakened enough for the highway crews to begin clearing the roads, but he remained in the diner with a second cup of coffee growing cold in front of him. Olivia had disappeared upstairs hours earlier. Maggie moved quietly behind the counter, pretending not to watch him. Eventually, she set a plate of eggs beside his cup. You should eat. Alexander looked toward the staircase. Does she always work nights? Maggie folded a dish towel over one shoulder. That sounds like her business. She is 8 months pregnant. She is also an adult. Alexander looked at the older woman. Maggie held his gaze without flinching. You may be a king where you come from, but in my diner, people get to answer for themselves. The words landed harder than he expected. Alexander looked back toward the stairs. For 8 months, he had believed Olivia chose silence. Now he was beginning to wonder how many decisions had been made around them while neither of them knew. The door at the top of the stairs opened just after 7. Olivia came down wearing a loose cream sweater beneath her coat, her blonde hair tied back, her face tired but composed. She stopped when she saw him still there. Your roads are open. Not yet. They will be soon. Alexander stood. Olivia moved toward the coffee machine. Do not stay because of me. I am staying because I need an answer. Her hand stopped near the stack of cups. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Maggie quietly disappeared into the kitchen. Alexander lowered his voice. How far along did you say you were? Olivia looked at him. You heard me the first time. 8 months. Yes. His pulse tightened. And you left Rowan territory 8 months ago. Olivia turned away. Alexander. I need to ask. No, you want to ask. He stepped closer, but kept several feet between them. Is the baby mine? Olivia closed her eyes for one brief second. When she opened them again, the hurt in her expression was no longer hidden. You lost the right to ask me that 8 months ago. Alexander went still. It was not an answer. That frightened him more than a denial would have. Olivia, if there is even a possibility that child is mine, I deserve to know. Her expression sharpened. Deserve. That came out wrong. Did it? She placed both hands on the counter, steadying herself. You think standing in front of me now means you get to demand the truth because the timing makes you uncomfortable. I am not demanding anything. You are a King Alpha. You do not have to raise your voice for something to sound like an order. Alexander had no defense against that. Olivia looked away, breathing slowly until the tension left her shoulders. Then the baby moved. Her hand went instinctively to her stomach. The gesture was so gentle that Alexander forgot every question in his mind for 1 second. Olivia noticed him watching and immediately stepped back. The thin chain beneath her sweater shifted again, revealing the silver Rowan ring resting against her chest. Alexander stared at it. Why do you still have that? Olivia covered the ring with one hand. Because throwing away something does not mean it never mattered. His voice dropped. Then why did you leave? She looked at him for a long time. You keep asking the wrong question. What should I be asking? Olivia reached for her coat. Why did no one stop me? She walked toward the stairs, then paused before taking the first step. The answer about the baby will not fix what happened between us. Alexander looked at her back. I know. Olivia turned just enough to meet his eyes. No, you do not. Then she climbed the stairs, leaving him alone with the question he had feared asking and an answer she had not given. By late morning, the highway had reopened, but Alexander did not leave. He sent most of his convoy back toward Rowan territory and kept only one vehicle parked across the road. Olivia noticed from the upstairs window and hated that part of herself still recognized the way he waited when he had made a decision. The room above the diner was small enough that she could cross it in 6 steps. A narrow bed stood against one wall. A second-hand dresser held neatly folded baby clothes. Medical bills were stacked beneath a ceramic lamp beside the window, organized by date, because organization was one of the few things Olivia could still control. She had built a life there one careful day at a time. It was not luxurious, but it was hers. Downstairs, Maggie found Alexander sitting at the same booth where he had spent most of the night. You are still here. Apparently. Maggie poured herself coffee and sat across from him without being invited. You should know something before you start making assumptions. Alexander looked at her. I am listening. She arrived 8 months ago with one suitcase, no car worth trusting, and enough cash for maybe 2 weeks. Maggie folded both hands around the mug. She asked for work before she asked where she could sleep. Alexander's expression tightened. She never told you who she was? No. I found out after you walked through my door. Maggie studied him. She never bragged about a palace. Never complained about leaving one. Never asked anyone here to rescue her. Alexander looked toward the staircase. Maggie continued. She works because she wants to pay her own bills. She lives upstairs because I offered her the room when I realized she was spending too much on a motel. She should not be working this late. Then maybe she should have had someone 8 months ago. The words landed cleanly. Alexander did not argue. An hour later, Olivia came downstairs carrying a cardboard box filled with clean coffee mugs. Alexander stood immediately. You should not be carrying that. She stopped. It weighs less than a bag of groceries. That is not the point. Then what is the point? He looked at her carefully. I am trying to understand how you ended up here. Olivia set the box on the counter. I drove until I could not keep driving. Maggie gave me a job. That is the entire story. No, it is not. It is the part you are entitled to. Alexander looked toward the old sedan parked beside the diner, then at the scuffed work shoes beneath Olivia's long skirt. You left a palace for this. Her eyes cooled. I did not leave a palace. I left a place where I had already been told I was no longer wanted. By whom? Olivia said nothing. Alexander stepped closer, but still left distance between them. You think I chose this for you? I think you allowed it. I did not know. Olivia gave him a tired look. That does not make it better. The answer stopped him. For months, Alexander had imagined Olivia somewhere far away, living comfortably and deliberately forgetting him. Standing in the diner now, surrounded by scratched tables, old linoleum, and the smell of coffee that never fully left the walls, that version of the story became impossible to believe. Olivia had not run toward a better life. She had survived the loss of one. Alexander looked at her stomach, then at the staircase leading to the room she called home. Why did you never come back? He asked. Olivia's face changed. Because I already did. He frowned. What does that mean? She held his gaze. I came back 3 times before I left for good. I waited outside your office. I sent requests. I sent letters. Every time, someone told me you were too busy to see me. Alexander felt something inside him go still. Olivia continued before he could speak. The last morning, I waited until sunrise. Her voice lowered. You never came. Alexander stared at Olivia as if the diner had shifted beneath his feet. You waited outside my office. She gave a small, humorless laugh. For hours. No one told me. I know that now. Her voice was quiet, but the exhaustion in it made every word heavier. Maggie moved silently into the kitchen, leaving them alone beneath the pale afternoon light. Alexander remained on the other side of the counter, his hands resting flat against the worn surface. Tell me exactly what happened. Olivia looked toward the windows where snow still clung to the edges of the parking lot. For several seconds, she seemed to be deciding whether the truth was worth reopening. Then she pulled out a chair and sat down. The morning I found out I was pregnant, I went to the palace medical wing twice because I thought the first test had to be wrong. Alexander did not move. It was not. Olivia placed one hand over her stomach. I spent the entire day trying to figure out how to tell you. His voice dropped. Why did you think you could not simply come to me? Her eyes lifted to his. Because by then, I already needed permission to enter half the rooms where you worked. The answer landed without anger, which made it worse. Olivia continued. I submitted a request to see you that afternoon. I was told you were in council meetings. I submitted another the next morning. I was told you did not have time. Alexander shook his head. I never saw either request. There was a third. Olivia. I waited outside your private office for nearly 3 hours. Her fingers tightened together. Vivian came out and told me you had instructed the staff not to interrupt you for personal matters. Alexander's expression changed at the name, but he stayed silent. I asked her to tell you it was important. She said she would. Olivia swallowed. That evening, I received a letter. What letter? She looked at him for a long moment. The one that told me to leave Rowan territory before sunrise. Alexander went completely still. No. Olivia's face hardened. Do not. I did not write that. It carried your seal. I do not care what seal it carried. I never wrote it. The diner seemed to shrink around them. Olivia looked away, blinking slowly as if the room had become too bright. It said my presence was creating instability around the throne. It said the kingdom could not continue recognizing me as your mate. Alexander's jaw tightened. Olivia, I swear to you. She looked back at him. I waited anyway. His breathing changed. She continued. I sat outside your office until the hallway windows started turning gold. I thought if you came out and looked at me, I would know whether the letter was real. Alexander could barely speak. Why did no one call me? That is the question you should be asking your palace. Her voice finally cracked. I waited for you until the sun came up. Silence fell between them. Alexander remembered that morning. A council meeting had started before dawn. Vivian had insisted there was an urgent diplomatic issue. He had entered through the private east corridor and never passed the main office doors. By the time the meeting ended, Olivia was gone. He had been told she had chosen to leave. I never knew you were there, he said. Olivia nodded once. And I never knew you did not know. Alexander looked at the woman sitting in front of him, at the baby she had carried through 8 months of loneliness, and understood that whatever truth came next would not allow either of them to return to the version of the past they had believed. Alexander returned to Rowan Palace before sunset. The roads were still wet from melted snow, and the gray stone towers looked exactly as they had 8 months earlier. That was what unsettled him most. The palace had remained unchanged while everything outside its walls had broken apart. He entered through the private east corridor and went directly to the records office. Open every communication log from the week Olivia Harper left, he ordered. The archivist looked surprised but did not question him. Within minutes, sealed boxes, digital records, and handwritten delivery logs covered the long table. Alexander searched through every page himself. There were letters from council members, trade representatives, neighboring territories, and palace staff. Nothing from Olivia. Not one request. Not one message. Not one record that she had ever stood outside his office waiting to tell him she was pregnant. By midnight, frustration had settled into something colder. Who handled personal correspondence before it reached this office? He asked. The archivist hesitated. At that time, Most requests involving your private household were screened through senior advisor Vivian Cross. Alexander looked up. Most. Anything considered personal, sensitive, or potentially disruptive to council business. The answer made the room go silent. The next morning, Alexander summoned Daniel Brooks, a former palace clerk who had retired 6 months earlier. Daniel arrived looking nervous, his hands folded tightly in front of him. Your Majesty, I am not sure what I can tell you. Tell me who received Olivia Harper's letters. Daniel looked toward the closed office door. They went through Advisor Cross. All of them, as far as I know. Alexander leaned forward. Did you ever see one? Daniel swallowed. Yes. What happened to it? I was told it contained private emotional matters and should not interrupt official business. Alexander's voice became dangerously calm. Where is it now? Daniel looked toward an old storage cabinet against the wall. There was one envelope that was never logged. I found it in a stack of files when I was clearing my desk before retirement. I thought it had already been handled. Within an hour, a sealed archive box was brought from storage. Alexander opened it himself. Beneath outdated schedules and unused invitations lay a single cream-colored envelope. His name was written across the front in Olivia's handwriting. His hand stopped. The date in the corner was 8 months old. The seal had never been broken. For several seconds, Alexander could only stare at it. Then he opened the envelope. The letter inside contained only a few lines. Alexander, I am pregnant. Please let me explain before you believe them. I do not know what you have been told, but I need you to hear this from me. Please do not let someone else decide what this means for us. Olivia. Alexander read it once. Then again. The room blurred at the edges, not from tears, but from the weight of understanding. Olivia had tried. She had written. She had waited. And while she believed he had rejected her, her words had been sitting unopened inside his own palace. Daniel stood quietly near the door. Your Majesty, I am sorry. Alexander folded the letter carefully. Do not apologize for a decision you did not make. He looked toward the windows where morning lights spread across the palace courtyard. Vivian Cross had controlled access to his private office. She had handled Olivia's correspondence. She had been present the morning Olivia disappeared. For the first time, the pieces no longer looked accidental. Alexander placed the letter inside his coat. Find Vivian. The guard near the door straightened. Immediately, Alexander looked down at Olivia's handwriting one last time. No. His voice was quiet. First, I am going back to her. Because after 8 months of silence, Olivia deserved to see the one thing neither of them had ever been allowed to hold at the same time. The truth. Alexander returned to the diner before midnight with Olivia's letter folded inside his coat. The storm had passed, leaving the parking lot wet and dark beneath the yellow lights. Through the front window, he saw Olivia wiping the counter while Maggie counted receipts near the register. For 1 second, he almost stayed outside. He had spent years believing that being King Alpha meant arriving with answers. Tonight, all he had was proof of a failure that belonged partly to someone else and partly to him. Olivia looked up when the door opened. Her expression changed the moment she saw his face. What happened? Alexander walked to the counter and placed the envelope between them. Olivia stared at her own handwriting. She did not touch it. Where did you get that? The palace archives. Her eyes lifted sharply. It was unopened. Alexander nodded. I found it this morning. Olivia looked down again. The diner became very quiet. Maggie glanced between them, then carried the receipt book into the kitchen. Olivia finally reached for the envelope and removed the letter. She did not need to read it. She already knew every word. Still, her fingers trembled slightly as she held the page. You really never saw this. No. Alexander's voice was low. I never saw any of them. Olivia closed her eyes for a moment. Alexander continued. Vivian's office handled personal correspondence before it reached me. One of the old clerks confirmed it. Olivia folded the letter carefully. So that is it. He frowned. What do you mean? You found the missing letter. Now we know someone interfered. Does that make everything simple again? No, because it does not for me. Alexander remained still. Olivia looked at him, and the hurt in her eyes was no longer hidden behind politeness. A missing letter explains why you did not know I was pregnant. It does not erase every time you let other people speak for you. He opened his mouth, then stopped. Olivia continued. Do you know how many times I sat in rooms where people discussed my future while you were not there? How many decisions reached me with your name attached to them? Alexander lowered his eyes. Too many. I was your mate, but I needed permission to see you. I needed approval to enter meetings that affected my own life. And every time I told myself it was because you were busy, because you were king, because I should understand. Her voice softened, which somehow made it hurt more. Vivian may have hidden my letters, Alexander. But she could only do that because you built a system where no one questioned speaking for you. He looked at her for a long moment. This was the point where he could defend himself, explain the pressure of ruling, remind her that he had been deceived too. Instead, he said, "You are right." Olivia went still. Alexander continued, "I did not write that letter. I did not know you were waiting outside my office. But I made it possible for people to keep you away from me, and I never noticed." She stared at him. "You are not going to blame Vivian for all of it. I am going to hold her responsible for what she did." His voice remained steady. "And I am going to hold myself responsible for what I failed to see." For the first time since he had found her, Olivia's anger seemed to lose its direction. Not disappear, just become harder to carry. Alexander took one step back from the counter. "I am not asking you to forgive me tonight." "Then what are you asking?" He looked at the letter in her hand. "Nothing." Olivia searched his face, suspicious of the answer. Alexander turned toward the door. "I only wanted you to know that you were telling the truth." He paused with one hand on the handle. "And that this time, I heard you myself." Then he stepped outside into the cold, leaving Olivia alone with the letter she had written 8 months earlier and a truth that finally arrived after everything it could have changed. 2 nights later, Olivia nearly dropped a tray before Maggie caught it. The diner was quiet. Only 3 customers scattered across the booths, but the room suddenly seemed too bright and too warm. Olivia gripped the edge of the counter until the dizziness passed. "That is enough," Maggie said. "I am fine. You have been saying that for 8 months. Maggie was already reaching for the phone. Olivia sighed. "Please do not make this dramatic." "Then stop trying to work through everything like exhaustion is a personality trait." 20 minutes later, Dr. Rachel Morgan arrived from the small clinic across town. She checked Olivia carefully in the upstairs room while Maggie waited near the door. Alexander did not know any of this until he returned to the diner and found Olivia's shift being covered by someone else. He looked toward the stairs. "Where is she?" Maggie crossed her arms. "Upstairs." His expression changed immediately. "What happened?" "She got dizzy. The doctor is with her." Alexander moved toward the stairs, then stopped himself. "Does she know I am here?" Maggie studied him. "No." "Then ask her if I can come up." The request surprised her enough that she paused. Several minutes later, Maggie returned. She said yes. Alexander climbed the stairs slowly. Olivia sat on the edge of the bed with a glass of water in both hands while Rachel packed away a blood pressure cuff. "The baby is fine," the doctor said before Alexander could ask. His shoulders lowered slightly. Olivia noticed. Rachel continued. "But she is exhausted. No more night shifts until after the baby arrives." Olivia frowned. "Rachel, that is not a suggestion." Alexander looked at Olivia. "You should listen to her." Olivia gave him a tired look. "You do realize agreeing with my doctor does not make you my doctor." "I am learning." Rachel hid a smile and left them alone. Alexander remained near the door. "Come back to Rowan territory." Olivia's expression closed immediately. He raised one hand. "I am not ordering you." It sounded familiar. "Then forget I said it." She looked at him, surprised. Alexander took a slow breath. "I want you somewhere safe and comfortable. But I understand that wanting something does not give me the right to decide it for you." Olivia looked down at the water. "I am staying here." "All right." She looked up again. "That is it. That is your answer." The next morning, Olivia discovered that Alexander had rented the empty apartment above the hardware store across the street from the diner. He did not move into the room above hers. He did not place guards outside her door. He simply stayed close enough to help and far enough that she could breathe. Each morning, he left breakfast with Maggie downstairs. He never brought it up himself. Sometimes Olivia took it. Sometimes she did not. He never asked. He stopped questioning her about the baby. He stopped offering money. When he wanted to speak with her, he knocked. If she said she was tired, he left. 3 days passed this way. On the 4th morning, Olivia opened her door and found a paper bag sitting on the floor beside a cup of decaffeinated coffee. A note rested beneath it. No orders. No royal seal. Just 4 words in Alexander's handwriting. "Eat something when you can." Olivia stared at the note for a long time. Across the street, Through the window of the small rented apartment, Alexander sat alone at a table covered with kingdom reports. For the first time since she had known him, the King Alpha was close enough to control everything and choosing not to. Olivia picked up the coffee, stepped back inside, and left her door open for several seconds before quietly closing it. On the fifth morning, Vivian Cross walked into the diner wearing a charcoal coat that looked too expensive for the room. Olivia saw her before Alexander did. For 1 second, every sound in the diner seemed to move farther away. The coffee machine hissed. A spoon struck ceramic. Snowmelt dripped from the edge of the roof outside. Vivian removed her gloves and looked around as though the scratched tables confirmed every opinion she had ever held. Olivia remained behind the counter. You should leave. Vivian gave a small sigh. I came to explain. 8 months late. Across the street, Alexander saw Vivian through the diner window and stood so quickly that his chair scraped the floor. By the time he entered, Olivia and Vivian were already facing each other in silence. You were told not to contact her, Alexander said. Vivian turned. You told me not to interfere further. I am here because there are facts neither of you understand. Alexander's expression hardened. You intercepted her letters. Yes. Olivia's hand tightened around the edge of the counter. Vivian did not look away, and I arranged for the notice that sent her out of Rowan territory. Alexander's voice dropped. You forged my order. I used your authority. Without my permission. Vivian reached into her leather folder and removed a single document. Not entirely. She placed it on the counter. Alexander recognized the seal immediately. His own signature rested at the bottom. Olivia stared at the page. Vivian spoke carefully. 8 months ago, the council passed a diplomatic decree concerning succession and formal recognition of royal mates. It stated that an Omega without noble blood could not be officially recognized beside the Rowan throne without council approval. Alexander's face changed. That decree was presented to me as a temporary ceremonial measure for treaty negotiations. You signed it. I did not sign an order removing Olivia. No, you signed something more useful. Vivian looked toward Olivia. I showed her the decree after it passed. I told her the king had chosen stability over her. When she tried to reach you, I made certain she could not. The diner fell silent. Olivia looked at Alexander. He did not reach for the document. He did not defend himself. Vivian continued. I believed I was protecting the throne. The council believed a common Omega would weaken your political position. I believe time would make both of you understand. Understand what? Olivia asked. Vivian finally looked at her directly. That love does not always survive responsibility. Olivia gave a quiet, bitter laugh. No, you just made sure ours never got the chance. Alexander picked up the decree and read his own signature again. The truth was worse than simple betrayal. Vivian had lied. She had manipulated them. But she had built that lie on a document he had signed without asking who it could hurt. You used my name, he said. I used the system you allowed me to use. Vivian's answer struck with perfect accuracy. Alexander looked at Olivia. She was not crying. That made the distance between them feel even greater. I did not know what this would become, he said. Olivia's voice stayed calm. I believe you. Relief almost reached his face before she continued. But your signature still made me small enough for someone else to erase. Alexander looked down at the page. For the first time, he understood that proving Vivian had deceived them would not be enough. She had created the lie, but he had helped build the world in which that lie could sound true. Vivian gathered her gloves. You wanted the truth. Now you have it. Alexander looked up. No, now I know what you did. He folded the decree once and placed it inside his coat. The truth is what I do about it next. Olivia watched him, unsure whether that promise was meant for her, the kingdom, or the man he had been before he walked into the diner. For the first time, Alexander knew it had to be meant for all three. Alexander waited until Vivian had left before speaking. The diner felt strangely quiet after the door closed behind her. Olivia stood near the counter with both hands resting against the worn edge, her face turned toward the window. Across the glass, the morning light reflected off the wet pavement in thin silver lines. Alexander remained several feet away. For once, he did not know whether moving closer would comfort her or make everything worse. I am sorry, he said. Olivia closed her eyes. For which part? The question stopped him. He looked down at the document inside his coat, the decree carrying his own signature, The paper that had given someone else the power to make Olivia believe she did not belong beside him. For signing something I did not understand well enough. For letting the council decide what mattered without asking who would be hurt. For creating a palace where you needed permission just to reach me. Olivia turned slowly. That is more honest than blaming Vivian. She is responsible for what she did. Alexander held her gaze. But I am responsible for what I allowed. Olivia looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped away from the counter and walked toward one of the empty booths. She sat carefully, one hand resting over her stomach. Alexander waited until she looked at the seat across from her before sitting down. You keep talking about the day I left, Olivia said. Like everything broke that morning. Alexander said nothing. It did not. Her voice stayed quiet. You did not lose me in one night. He looked at her. Olivia continued. You lost me every time someone at the palace looked through me because I was not born into the right family. Every time a council meeting decided something about my life, and I found out afterward. Every time I asked whether you could come to dinner, and someone told me the king was too busy. Alexander lowered his eyes. I thought I was protecting you from the pressure of the throne. You were leaving me alone inside it. The words landed softly and stayed there. Olivia looked toward the window. I kept telling myself that you loved me, so the rest should not matter. Then one day I realized I was spending more time defending your absence than feeling your presence. Alexander felt the truth of it before he could form an answer. I failed you. Olivia looked back at him. Yes. She did not soften the word. He did not ask her to. And Vivian used that failure because she knew I would believe her. Alexander's jaw tightened. I wish I could undo it. You cannot. I know. Olivia studied him, perhaps expecting another promise, another offer, another grand solution. Instead, Alexander reached into his coat, removed the decree, and placed it on the table between them. Then I will stop pretending an apology is enough. She looked at the document. What are you going to do? Change it. For me? No. His answer came immediately. Olivia's eyes lifted. For every Omega who comes after you. For every person the council decides is too ordinary to stand beside someone powerful. Alexander leaned back slightly. You do not have to return to Rowan territory. You do not have to forgive me. You do not have to choose me. But this law should never have existed. And that remains true even if I never see you again. Olivia looked down at the table. The baby moved beneath her hand, and she breathed slowly. You finally understand something, she said. Alexander waited. Love is not what you say when you are afraid to lose someone. Her eyes met his. It is what you protect before you realize they might leave. Alexander had no answer that could make the past smaller. So he did the only thing he had learned to do since finding her again. He listened. Alexander returned to Rowan Palace the next morning carrying the old decree in one hand and Olivia's unopened letter in the other. By noon, the council chamber was full. Vivian Cross sat near the far end of the table, no longer beside his chair. The other advisors had already heard enough to understand why they had been summoned, but none of them seemed prepared for what Alexander placed in front of them. This decree is revoked effective immediately. A senior councilman frowned. Your Majesty, the succession laws cannot be changed because of one personal dispute. Alexander looked at him. They are being changed because they were wrong. Another advisor leaned forward. The unborn child may be your heir. That makes the mother a matter of royal security. Alexander's expression cooled. She is a person before she is anything connected to the throne. The room went silent. Then bring her back under palace protection, the councilman said. She is living above a diner while carrying a possible royal heir. Alexander rested both hands on the table. The child is not a royal asset, and neither is the mother. Several advisors exchanged uneasy looks. You cannot simply leave this decision to an Omega who may not understand the political consequences. Alexander's gaze sharpened. That sentence is exactly why we are here. He looked around the chamber. For years, this council has treated bloodline as character, status as worth, and obedience as gratitude. I signed documents built on those assumptions because I trusted the people presenting them more than I examined the harm they could cause. That ends today. Vivian finally spoke. And if Olivia refuses to return? Alexander turned toward her. Then she refuses. You would allow the mother of your child to remain outside your territory? I would allow Olivia to decide where she lives. Vivian studied him. That is not how kings protect what belongs to them. Alexander's voice became very quiet. She does not belong to me. The words settled heavily across the room. He ordered a full review of every law that restricted an Omega's standing based on family name or social rank. He removed Vivian from all authority over private royal correspondence, pending an official investigation. He established a direct communication office so no advisor could ever again control who was allowed to reach him. Then, after hours of argument, Alexander left the palace without asking the council for approval. He returned to the diner that evening. Olivia was sitting near the window with a blanket over her knees when he knocked against the glass instead of walking straight inside. She looked up, surprised. After a moment, she nodded. Alexander entered carrying no guards, no documents, and no royal insignia. He stopped several feet from her. The decree is gone. Olivia studied his face. You changed it. Yes. Because of me? Because you showed me what it allowed people to do. She looked down at her hands. The council must hate that. They will survive. A faint smile almost appeared on her face. Alexander continued. They want me to bring you back to Rowan territory. Olivia's expression immediately guarded itself. And what do you want? He took a slow breath. I want you safe. I want the chance to know my child, if the child is mine. And I want another chance with you more than I know how to say. Olivia looked away. Alexander did not move closer. But none of that gives me the right to choose for you. She looked back at him. So what happens now? Whatever you decide. And if I stay here, I will still be nearby if you want me nearby. And if I never go back? His answer took only a second. Then I will learn the road. Olivia stared at him. Alexander held her gaze. Come back only if you want to. Stay here if you want to. I will still be the child's father if you allow me to be. For the first time, his power was not in what he could command. It was in everything he was willing not to. Olivia made her decision 4 days later. She did not announce it to the council, and she did not ask Alexander for permission. She simply called Dr. Rachel, discussed the remaining weeks of her pregnancy, then packed the same suitcase she had carried into the diner 8 months earlier. This time, it was not because someone had told her to leave. Maggie stood beside the old sedan with tears in her eyes and both arms folded tightly across her chest. You know you can come back. Olivia smiled. I know. Alexander waited beside his own vehicle, but did not touch her bags until she nodded toward them. Even then, he carried only what she handed him. The drive back to Rowan territory took nearly 2 hours. Olivia watched familiar mountains appear beyond the highway and felt old memories tightening around her chest. Alexander noticed, but did not fill the silence. When the palace towers finally appeared in the distance, Olivia turned to him. I am not living there. Alexander nodded. I know. She looked at him, surprised. You already arranged something? No. You told me you wanted to choose. He handed her a folder containing several available homes near the Royal Medical Center. These are options. Nothing has been signed. Olivia looked through the pages and selected a small 2-story house less than a mile from Dr. Morgan's temporary clinic office. It had a porch, a garden buried beneath winter snow, and enough distance from the palace that no one could mistake it for another royal chamber. Alexander signed nothing in her name. There was no announcement, no ceremony, no public declaration that the former mate of the King Alpha had returned. That evening, Olivia stood inside the quiet living room surrounded by unopened boxes. Alexander placed the last bag near the stairs and turned toward the door. I will let you rest. Alexander. He stopped. Olivia looked down at the Rowan ring still hanging from the chain around her neck. The baby is yours. The room became completely still. Alexander did not move. She watched the truth reach his face slowly, not as triumph, but as something almost too fragile to touch. You knew the whole time, he said. Olivia nodded. Yes. He took a careful breath. Why did you not tell me when I asked? Her eyes filled with the weight of 8 months. Because I needed to know something first. Alexander waited. If there had been no baby, would you still have come back for me? The question settled between them. Olivia continued. I did not want you here because the kingdom needed an heir. I did not want you apologizing because you suddenly realized you might lose your child. I needed to know whether you could finally see what happened to me even if there was nothing royal at the end of it. Alexander lowered his eyes. When he looked at her again, his voice was steady. I should have come back before I ever knew there was a child. Olivia said nothing. I should have noticed you were alone while you were still standing beside me. I should have made sure no door in my kingdom could close between us because someone else decided you were not important enough. He paused near the doorway. And I am not asking you to trust me because I finally understand that. Olivia rested one hand over her stomach. Then what are you asking? Alexander looked at the closed door behind him. Nothing tonight. He opened it, then waited on the threshold. I am just saying I am here. Olivia studied him for several seconds before giving a small nod. Alexander stepped outside. He did not ask for a key. He did not leave guards at the gate. He simply walked toward his car and let Olivia close the door herself. But this time, when the door shut between them, neither of them believed it meant goodbye. 3 months later, Alexander stood outside Olivia's small house with one hand raised toward the door. He had been there dozens of times since the baby was born, but he still knocked every time. The first weeks had taught him how much could change when a man stopped assuming that love gave him permission. He visited when Olivia invited him. He learned how to warm bottles, fold blankets badly, and walk quietly through the living room when the baby finally fell asleep. He attended council meetings during the day and returned in the evening without guards or ceremony. He never asked Olivia when she planned to move into the palace. He never mentioned the empty royal rooms waiting less than a mile away. The council had stopped asking too. Alexander had made his answer clear. Olivia and their child were not symbols for the kingdom to arrange. They were people with a home of their own. That evening, soft spring rain darkened the porch steps while warm light glowed behind the curtains. Alexander knocked twice. A moment later, the door opened. Olivia stood there holding their daughter against her shoulder. Her blonde hair was loosely tied back, and the silver Rowan ring still rested on the chain around her neck. She looked tired in the ordinary way new parents often did, but there was peace in her face that Alexander had not seen 8 months earlier behind the diner counter. You are early, she said. By 4 minutes. That is suspicious. I can wait outside. Olivia almost smiled. Alexander looked past her only after she stepped slightly to the side. May I come in? The question was simple. Once, he had been a king alpha who believed every door in his territory would open when he approached. Now he understood that the most important door in his life mattered precisely because it did not have to. Olivia held his gaze for a moment, then stepped aside. Come in. Alexander crossed the threshold. The house smelled faintly of coffee and baby lotion. A basket of clean laundry sat near the stairs. Several council documents he had left the previous night were stacked beneath a children's book on the table. Nothing about the room looked royal. He had never felt more welcome anywhere. Olivia carefully placed the baby in a small cradle near the couch. The child stirred, opened sleepy gray eyes, and wrapped one tiny hand around Alexander's finger when he reached toward her. He became completely still. Olivia sat beside him. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then she placed her hand near their daughter's, close enough that the baby's fingers rested between them. Alexander looked at Olivia. Are you happy here? She considered the question seriously. I am. His chest tightened with something that felt like relief and loss at the same time. He nodded. Good. Olivia watched him. You are not going to ask whether I am coming back to the palace? No. Why? Alexander looked around the small warm room. Because I finally understand that coming back to me does not have to mean going back there. Olivia's expression softened. Alexander continued. I want a life with you, but I want the one you choose, not the one my title chooses for us. Rain tapped gently against the windows. Olivia looked down at their daughter's hand wrapped around his finger. Then she reached for Alexander's free hand and held it. He did not move at first. He simply let her decide the distance. You learned to knock, she said quietly. A faint smile appeared on his face. It took me longer than it should have. Olivia leaned back against the couch, still holding his hand. There was no throne waiting in the room. No council. No declaration. Only a sleeping child, a warm lamp, and 2 people learning how to begin again without pretending the past had never happened. Alexander had once believed being King Alpha meant every door would open for him. Olivia taught him that the only doors that truly mattered were the ones someone chose to open.